to slow down so that these bumps on the road don't ruin our vehicles, don't break apart the things that make up what we have here on this earth. But unfortunately, we don't do that. We just keep going full speed. We keep driving, going over these bumps and over these bumps, because the main issue is that we only see today. We only see the life that we have here right now. We forget that there is something much greater beyond the existence that we have here on earth. And this is the reason why the smallest things tend to affect us. And I think the most common thing that affects all of us, at least here in Orlando, to me and to most of us, is traffic. Right? Everybody gets upset at traffic because I think traffic is the place where selfishness is easily exposed. Every one of us are selfish in traffic. Why? Because we own the highway. The road is ours. The highway is ours. If somebody cuts me off, how dare he cut me off? This is my street. This is my highway. And this upsets me when that happens. I do not like it. So then instead of allowing myself to go over the speed bump slowly, I rush through it and I react at this thing instead of thinking about what's going on and calming myself. So then I get angry and my selfishness just consumes me. It's like a poison. It just eats away within me. And then things just get worse and worse from there on, that everything that happens in traffic is the end of the world. And this is a serious problem for all of us because we all experience it. We all do it. We're all imperfect, so it's normal. It's within our nature at this moment in our evolutionary stage. And we see this even among animals. As cute as they may be, sometimes they just look so angry, fighting against each other, yelling at each other, making sounds that we don't understand. Perhaps they're even talking and we don't know because we don't have the right instrumentation to capture their conversation, but it looks like they're arguing. And why? Why does this happen? Why does this happen here on Earth? Why does it happen to us? And another example, which I think is really amazing when you think about it because it's so simple, but I think we can all relate to it, is Wiley Coyote and the Roadrunner, right? Wiley Coyote is doing what? He's always trying to ruin the Roadrunner's life. He's always irritated at the fact that how can this thing, this being, this bird, be so peaceful and so happy every time? It annoys me greatly, so I'm going to try to ruin his life. But what happens in this cartoon every time he tries to do something to the Roadrunner? He ends up ruining himself, right? He tries and tries and tries, and every time the rock falls on his face or on top of his head. The bomb goes off right next to him. It never works. And as funny as it may be and as simple as it is, the cartoon has a huge lesson for us, right? It's very interesting. We don't think about this, and we don't know sometimes that the most simple things have the deepest messages, sometimes. And for all we know, the person who created the cartoon might have been a medium and was inspired to create this thing that was very simple, but deep within there's a great message. And what is that message? That we need to get along with each other, right? We all have our road runners in life. We all do, that we want to irritate or annoy or try our hardest to, I don't know, do something to them. But when we try, we end up in the same situation as Wiley Coyote. And why is this? Why does it happen to us here on Earth? Well, it seems like sometimes the Earth is going to implode from within, just going to explode. And that's because it is the nature of our planet. The spirits taught us that the Earth is a planet of trials and expiations, and the beings that inhabit the Earth are imperfect. So it's our nature to have these disagreements. The energies on this planet are very, very low, very dense. It is a planet that's still very far away from a happy place. And that's fine. It's natural, it's progress, it's a law of nature. Eventually we will get to that place. But right now it feels like this. But why does it feel like this? Because we allow it to consume us. We say to ourselves, I'm a very calm person, I'm a very relaxed person, but that guy irritates me like crazy. And then we think, okay, so who's in control of whose life? Am I in control of my emotions, or am I ceding control or giving control to that other individual? Is he controlling my life? Is he controlling my emotions? Because that's basically what happens. So we have the ability to metaphorically take a scissor and cut this before the earth implodes from within. And what is the scissor? What is this thing that allows us to prevent this from happening? Are the lessons that we have been given by Jesus. And it is in the Spiritist doctrine, this blessed philosophy, science, that gives us all the information we need to try to change this path for ourselves. Because change doesn't come from the top, ever. Change comes from the very bottom. The top of a building needs its foundation. So the change has to come from within us. We have to change first. We can't give away our responsibility to someone else or something else to change us, because that's never going to work. We can't just push away the things that we have to do. So eventually, when we begin to understand what's going on earth, that light, that fire, that spark goes away, and we can prevent it from actually imploding from within. Why? Because we begin to see life in a different perspective. We begin to understand that, yes, we're all here on earth together. Yes, we're all imperfect. We all have our issues. So why add to the issues by reacting to others' aggressions, by reacting to arguments? Why fight poison with poison? A firefighter doesn't go to a fire, and because he's so annoyed at the fact that he can't put out the fire, he says, oh, you know what? I'm sick of you, and begins to throw kerosene at the fire. What's going to happen? The fire is going to become greater. And as he's mad and enraged and throwing this kerosene all over this fire, what's going to happen? The kerosene is going to sprinkle on his skin. And what's going to happen as a consequence? That fire, that problem is going to begin to slowly consume his vehicle, because he didn't slow down to observe the bumps. So we can't allow this to happen, because we need to understand that there's something greater. Christ taught us when we pray to say, Our Father who is in heaven. Even though sometimes it seems like we want to say, My Father who is in heaven, because every time we pray, or most of the times, we're asking for things for ourselves. But it is our Father. The moment he said this and taught us this, we got a different vision, perspective of life and of who we are. Because if we look at a household and we have a father, the father obviously is the progenitor. And those that are in the household, the sons and daughters of this father. So by taking this into the greater perspective that Christ taught us, then if we are all sons and daughters of this great Father, then the earth is the household, and we are all brothers and sisters in the same family. And once we begin to recognize this, we begin to understand that we are all going through the same issues, same trials and troubles in this life. We begin to kind of ease up a bit and not be so aggressive and reactive to things that happen in our lives. If we go further with these teachings from Christ, obviously, he says, You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. Again, the reference to the Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. All right, so I have that individual. He really annoys me. But nature teaches us a lesson. Because when the sun rises in the morning, that individual who I think doesn't deserve anything gets to be blessed by the beautiful sunrise. He is blessed by being able to see the nature around him. The person over here who annoyed me, she is blessed by receiving a benevolent and soothing rain on a warm summer day. Criminals receive rain. They see the sunrise. People whom we perceive as being pariahs or people whom we don't want to associate with in society, they get to see this blessing. What does that mean? What perspective does this give to us? If you look at it in a Venn diagram, a very simple one, where the left circle represents the sun, The right circle represents the rain. And what did I just say here? Every one of us, no matter how far behind or how far ahead we are in our own evolution, in our own morality and intellect and intelligence and virtues, we are all blessed by the Father. So this, in essence, tells us that we have an equal essence within. And we have to begin to understand this when we think of our brothers and sisters who might irritate us. Because everyone gets to see the sun, and everyone gets to receive a soothing and cooling rain. And the other problem is that there is a certain thing that may repel us and push us away from wanting to be near someone who may irritate us. There are energies there that we don't see, that we have not yet been able to detect because science hasn't advanced enough to be able to detect this, or instrumentations that we have are very, very primitive, so we're not able to capture this. But it's there, and I'll tell you why it's there, because we feel it. And if we feel it, that means that there's a cause behind all of this effect, and the cause must be that there is something there, preventing us from wanting to interact with somebody who we just can't get along with, who irritates us for some reason. We don't understand why. Because if this person harbors anger, sorrow, depression, it is almost as if the energies that surround him are all negative, dense, heavy. Who here likes to be around someone who is always sad? Who here likes to be around someone who is always depressed, angry? Nobody does. Is it because of that person? Partly because they allowed themselves to be consumed by these emotions. But the fact that these emotions emanate these energies prevent us from approaching that person. We're always walking on eggshells. And the littlest thing is going to instigate or spark that explosive that's within, and they're going to react in the worst way possible. So between the two of them, between the two of us in this relationship, there's this thing that does not attract us to one another. It moves us further apart from one another. A malicious thought sets up a vibrating current that produces an unpleasant impression. A good thought, by contrast, surrounds the receiver with a very agreeable energy. This is the reason we experience such different sensations when we are near a friend as opposed to an enemy, what I just explained here. So this enemy, quote unquote, it's a heavy word. We don't have enemies anymore. None of us are individually at war with anyone. None of us are dueling with anyone. We have people whom we don't agree with, people that may antagonize us and irritate us, but none of us have enemies. Enemies is a very deep word. Maybe governments have enemies, but we don't have enemies. None of us do. So this individual who is irritable and angry all the time, we see this here, this energy around him, this aura, what André Luiz calls the psychosphere that is around him is just full of negativity. And it prevents us from penetrating it. But are we going to contribute to that negativity? Is that the right thing to do? If they irritate us and we want to be away from them, do we want to contribute to that and make it worse for him? If our heart is already filled with sorrow and pain and anger, we have to instead replace that content with love. Not the love that we have for families, obviously, or for friends or whomever, but a different type of love, because love is a word that encompasses several different emotions, varying degrees of an emotion, because our language is very primitive and we can't call or label each one of them in a different way. So love encompasses everything for us. But it's a very different type of love. It is a love of understanding. Understanding the situation that that person finds themselves in. Understanding that he is in the same situation as I am because we live on the same planet. If we are on the same imperfect planet, that means that I am just as imperfect as he is. That I have just as many problems, otherwise I would not be here. Remember what Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. So we have this repelling action, this energy that pushes us apart. Then what do? We fight this. We don't fight this energy because that's the bad word here. That's not what the message I'm trying to pass. But we actually improve this energy by emanating understanding, like I said, compassion to this individual. Because when we do that, yes, we might not at first penetrate that thick shield of depression or anger or whatever it may be. But with hard effort, hard work, and sincere feelings that you want to see that person become better, slowly and surely, this energy begins to overtake his psychosphere. And he becomes saturated with positive things. It's like prayer at a distance. You pray for someone, that person is receiving those energies. I guarantee you they're receiving it. As long as the prayer is sincere, that person is receiving the energies. And it's just accumulating around them and around them like a big luminescent tornado of energy. And the moment the person gives up and is tired of acting this way, the energies that are saturated around him begin to seep in and penetrate. Like a dam that is ruptured, broken, and a little bit of water begins to go through and seep in, droplet after droplet. Eventually, the crack becomes bigger and the water rushes in. And that person becomes healed and cured eventually because they opened themselves to this wonderful thing that was accumulated around them, but they just couldn't see it because they're too busy looking at this life, about the problems of this world, of this life, forgetting that there's something much greater. And we, of course, have the opposite effect when we have friends and loved ones. We interact with one another. We feed off each other because we are sons and daughters of the Father. And thus, we have divine energies within. If we are his Father, like Jesus said, because we are, that means we have his essence within. And if Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world, yet he said that the Father of his kingdom is also our Father, that means that our family might be a lot bigger than we think it is. Because then the Father is not just the Father of the family of the earth, it is the Father of a much greater family, the family of the cosmos, where we have other brothers and sisters whom we've yet to meet. Or maybe some people have met, we don't know. To believers, the situation appears very different because their vision extends beyond the past and into the future. Us Spiritists have been given and blessed with this wonderful doctrine that teaches us this, between which the present life is no more than a point in time. They know that this is a planet of trials and that meeting wrongdoing and wicked people is to be expected. They know the wrong they encounter constitutes a test they must endure. From this elevated perspective, reverses in life are easier to accept and less bitter, whether they originate with other people or from material concerns. As they learn not to complain, about their trials, they are equally expected not to complain about those who become instruments of their sorrows. I welcome everyone to read this chapter because it's a great chapter. Chapter 12 of the Gospel, according to Spiritism, or explained by the Spiritist doctrine, because it is illuminating and it helps us to understand our situations in life. So we talked about Earth, and we talked about this greater perspective that removes us from the immediate life and allows us to glimpse the greater life, the broader life that we have to understand in order to overcome those bumps in our roads and slow down and accept them like Jesus accepted the bumps in his road as the example for humanity. Because he's the guide and model. Guide means we should follow, model means we should copy. So we should follow his footsteps and copy his behavior. Look at him. How much did he suffer? How much aggression? A crown of thorns was placed on his head. Did he react? No. He accepted his trial at peace. This is the biggest lesson. His whole life was a life of turning the other cheek. The moral side that we have and that we keep hidden within. The light that's within us that we just keep hidden. But the thing is, like the passage of the gospel that I talked about last week in the gospel moment, which is placing the lamp under a bushel, is that we may try to hide the lamp, the light that's within us. But eventually, with time, as we progress, it'll come out. Because we understand things, we become more intelligent, we earn morals and virtues, and eventually that light just shines outwards, and we can no longer hide it. But so in planet Earth, we've talked about this, we can imagine that we have here, we know that we have imperfect spirits on Earth. And we can say that the spirits form a range. So looking at this graph, every single dot would represent an incarnated spirit on Earth. Those who come here as messengers of the Christ or of the Father obviously are not in this range. They are further ahead. They're not even visible here. But they're sent to Earth, they incarnate here on Earth as messengers of the gospel of the divine laws to help push humanity to advance and to progress. Because sometimes we need a kick in the butt to move forward. And somebody comes here, whether it's a scientist, a philosopher, a religious figure, they are incarnated here. They come into this sphere, this range of activity in which we are all found, and just pushes this graph upwards, and we all move upwards and progress with them, if we have the ears to hear. So in this graph, we have here moral advancement, representing love, intellectual advancement, representing wisdom and knowledge. And we can see here immediately that what's more important really is love. For example, the first dot here on the left, look how far up he is developed in love. And the intellectual advancement is not that important because he's developing the virtues that really matter. But we can see somebody who's very intelligent, intellectually advanced, but look at how low they are with their moral education, with their love. So we have all these types of people here on earth, including all of us. And the goal is to eventually move forward and ahead, to get out of this range. And understanding this, we begin to appreciate the differences between each and every one of us. Because reincarnation is the one thing that explains inequality. Inequality isn't because of a law, isn't because of a government, isn't because of a company, of an economy. Equality is because of reincarnation. Inequality, I mean. Because we are all different spirits in different levels and stages of evolution. And we are all going to receive that which we deserve based upon our merits, that which we need to progress and to become better. And so we must realize that we are all together in this project. We are all resources in a project. And who is the project manager? Jesus Christ is a project manager of earth. And if we are part of this project, we want to help him to succeed in the project. Because if we don't perform well, we might be kicked off the project. And what happens when we're kicked off a project? That's already not really a really advanced project. We're going to go to a lesser project, to a lower range in this graph of evolution. And then we're going to blaspheme God. Why is my life so bad? It's our choice. So understanding this, we all need to work together. Stop being aggressive. Stop reacting. Understand the position of that resource in this project, that he's undergoing the same things we are, because pain doesn't discriminate. Rich people, poor people, fat people, skinny people, healthy people, sick people, short people, tall people, white, black, yellow, doesn't matter. Everyone has pain. And pain teaches us what we need in order to learn and advance. So thinking about this, all of these here experience some kind of pain. So again, why increase the pain of someone else who's undergoing something that you're also undergoing? Perhaps not as severe, but we still have some level of pain. Every one of us does, because we're imperfect and we live in an imperfect world. An imperfect world as a consequence of our own imperfection, not the other way around. So let's help each other and let's progress. Spiritists have still other reasons for being tolerant of their enemies. Again, not enemies, but maybe people whom we don't agree with. First, they know that wrongdoing is not a permanent characteristic of the human condition, but arises from a state of imperfection, and that one day wrongdoers will realize their mistakes and turn toward that good. The example of the stick figure in the previous slide. He'll begin to accept this position, and the virtues that are within him, like seeds that are asleep, are going to awaken, and he's going to move forward. So this is nothing more than indulgence towards others' errors and mistakes, acceptance and tolerance. Instead of just fighting back with anger, is just simply turning the other cheek. Much like children who, growing toward adulthood, learn to steer themselves in the right direction. And now thinking of the greater family, we have spoken of the local family, the one that we have in our own household, whom those of us who unfortunately have not yet been given the blessing of understanding the greater life, we think that we only have to get along with this nucleus of people. That's it. Everyone else, I don't care. They're not important to me. You're not part of my family. You're not part of my friends. You're not part of that nucleus. I don't want to know about you. Whatever you do irritates me. I don't want to deal with you. Well, guess what? That's not how it works. That person is a part of our lives, is a part of our family as well. the greater family, the family of earth. And then, as I said, Jesus did say that my kingdom is not of this world. And he called God, or the term we give to the supreme intelligence here on earth, God, as our Father. So if he is our Father, and his kingdom is not, and Jesus' kingdom is not of this world, that means that the Father is the kingdom, God is the Father of Jesus' kingdom that is not of this world. And what is the kingdom that is not of this world? It's none other than those that are in the infinite of the universe, in the infinite cosmos, whether it is the material dimension or the spiritual dimension or any other dimension that we are not aware of, that's where the kingdom is found. Everything is a part of the Father. So we are all part of all of this. And we have to understand this, because this allows us to understand how small we are, yet how proud we are. We are proud of this tiny grain of sand on a beach. It's a tiny grain of sand amongst the stars. And what are we in this tiny grain of sand but tiny molecules or germs on it? And yet we think we own the world. We think the highway is ours. We're so selfish, self-centered, and proud. Why? Look at all this. Imagine this. The moment humanity realizes this and realizes that we have potentially other brothers and sisters out there, then perhaps we will bind together and realize that we are also a family here. The differences are minuscule. Color, race, country, whatever. What does that matter in the grand scheme of things? Once we all realize this, then we can progress and proceed. Then Earth will advance to its next stage. And then perhaps we'll be presented to the greater neighborhood, because now we're bound together, consolidated in love, instead of just fighting amongst each other, which is so silly. It is like the conquerors and the generals and the emperors, presidents, whomever they may be, who try and control lands and territories throughout history. What for? What for? In this tiny grain of sand? See how short-sighted that is. How myopic is that? When we see two little kids in an elementary school fighting for that sand lot, for that little space, because they want to play with their Tonka trucks and the other boy doesn't let them, don't we find that so cute? Oh, they're so cute. They're so silly. They don't know what they're doing. Well, what's the difference between what Christ said at the cross when those who crucified him acted the same way because they conquered the world? They wanted to take over this sand lot known as earth. And what did he say? The same thing we say to these little kids. God, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. Do the little children know what they do? So we little spiritual children do not know what we do. So we need to understand this, because only then will we begin to really, really advance. And Kardec says, the precept, love your enemies, then isn't limited to the earthly environment and the present life. Rather, it is an article of form in the universal code of solidarity and brotherhood. In other words, love encompasses the cosmos because it is a divine verb. Christ exemplified love. He is the biggest example. And Herculano Pires says a beautiful thing that it summarizes what I've just explained. When men understand that they are spirits, that they are passing through earth, and that their destiny is transcendence, to rise above the human condition in order to reach the superior condition, they will then be able to begin to establish on earth a social order in the image of the order that God established in the universe. And this is a really interesting thing that I found in the book O Consolador, or the Consoler Psychograph by Chico Xavier and dictated by the Spirit Emmanuel. In item 71 of that book, the following question is placed to Emmanuel. How does one judge Earth's position in relation to other worlds? And this is just to reinforce what I was explaining about how little we are, and yet we think we're so great. The greatness of the sidereal plane, or space, or other dimensions, where the communities of systems manifest themselves, is too deep, too profound to permit us to assign it a definition with petty earthly conventions. First slap on the face. In the whirlwind of the infinite, The planetary system centralized by our sun is excessively simple, constituting a very, very poor aspect of creation. Second slap in the face. It is enough to remind ourselves that Capella, a binary system, meaning it's composed of two stars that orbit each other, one of our closest neighbors, has a sun that has a radius of 12.2 times larger than our own star and is 78.5 times more luminous, without forgetting that the Earth itself is 1,300,000 times smaller than our sun. And our sun is a very small star. If all we need to do is go to YouTube and search sizes of stars, and we'll see how small the sun is. It is really small compared to the largest one that we've detected so far. So astronomy puts us in our place, and Emmanuel here is putting us in our place as well. So third slap to the face. Last slap, the biggest one, that reinforces what I said about people wanting to conquer things. You know, we own property in this world, and all of a sudden we think that this is my property, I have to defend it. No, it's not. It is in these great figures that we understand the extension of our humbleness in the universe, sincerely pitying the situation of human conquerors of all types and facets. Not only human conquerors that lead nations and armies, but human conquerors in the household. How many fathers and mothers, brothers, sisters, whomever, want to dominate their household, right? It's normal. Everyone does that. Doesn't matter who and what level they find themselves. Who in their eagerness to hoard for themselves all material patrimonies give us the impression of ridiculous and vain buffoons of life. There you go. These are all the slaps that should bring us back to sanity and reality, and realize our small place in the universe, and that we have to work together and not fight with each other if we want to progress. There has to be a certain solidarity between us, fraternity. That's all it's all about. Not fighting, not arguing, nothing like that. So we can think about another analogy that would be good about this, for this passage, is we think about the Roman centurions, right? They fought in legions, and their defensive stance was the Phalanx, which originated in Greece. They would cover themselves with shields so that the enemy could not penetrate whatsoever. And it was a wonderful strategy because we know in history how well the Roman Empire did. But for this allegory, for this analogy rather, we ourselves are behind those shields, right? When somebody is aggressive to us and yells at us, we immediately want to, most of us anyway who don't react immediately, we want to kind of like just get away from the situation. I want to form this shield. And that's great, because by forming this shield, this mental shield, where you don't allow these things to affect you, you are protecting yourself. If you pray, concentrate, and try to just not lower yourself vibrationally to the level of that individual who is irritated, then you don't connect. So the shield works. The things just kind of bounce off. But then what happens usually? We can't maintain that level of harmony in prayer, so we pull out our swords, our spears. So we find a crack in the shield, say, oh yeah? Well, here's what I think. And then we fight fire with fire. Instead of fighting the fire with a peaceful water that will extinguish the flames of discord and arguments. So Jesus tells us in Matthew 5:38-42, which is the passage for the evening finally, you have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. Obviously, Gandhi has a wonderful saying where he alluded to this passage and said, if the law of an eye for an eye was still dominant, everyone on earth would be blind. And I think that carries a pretty deep message for all of us. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. Obviously, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, lex talionis, the law of retaliation, was something for the Mosaic era when humanity was still really, really immature, way more immature than we still are. Do not resist an evil person. And Jesus came and showed us the new way, the new path, which is love. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. No, it's not to turn the other cheek in defiance. Like, oh yeah? I'll hit the side. No, it's not. That's not what he means. We have to understand exactly what he meant, which is to turn a moral face to the problem, not the emotional face. not allow emotion to consume us, and instead be able to control it and dominate our inner selves, the inner conqueror who wants to dominate our own property. We can't allow that to happen. Let's let these seeds to develop so we can transform ourselves and separate the wheat from the chaff. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, etc., do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. So in essence, what do we need to do here? Like in the example in the past slides of treating that person who is aggressive and angry at you with love, but not the same love, obviously, that we will have, because there are different energies there, not the same love that we will have for families or friends, but to treat them with indulgence, with care, compassion, understanding, because, as I said before, we are all in the same situation. So those spears need to turn progressively into beautiful flowers, but not flowers in the sense of offering flowers to people, but in the sense of the words. Kindly scented words of peace that represent these flowers. Offer them a bouquet. Even if they offer you fire, a spear, a sword, offer them peace, offer them kindness. Because then the shield is going to be that much more effective. Because eventually they'll grow tired of trying to antagonize you, of trying to irritate you, or irritate us and antagonize us. And we will finally have won them over. Because they'll back away and they realize, maybe, I should change my ways. I should change my conduct. So we set the example. That's why it's important for us to find that inner peace. Right? Christ told, I think it was, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Simon Peter to holster his sword when he was aggressive towards the centurion and cut off his ear. So we have to do the same thing. Holster our sword and instead offer an olive branch, so to speak, something peaceful to the person who's aggressive to us. Teach them the example like Christ did to all of us. His whole entire life was a life of turning the other cheek. It's the biggest lesson. Everything is turning the other cheek. Acts of generosity dissuade vindictiveness. So what I just said. It may even turn an enemy into a friend. Here or in the hereafter. So not only in this life, but in a greater life. And perhaps on the other side of life, that person who was our quote-unquote enemy might become somebody who helps us. Because we only show them good instead of evil or bad. So then we have a little guardian angel who before was one of those conquerors who wanted to dominate us through negative energies and negative actions. On the other hand, aggression only inflames an enemy, whose actions then become the conduit through which divine justice works to correct the unforgiving heart. So we should not try to correct anyone, but only offer peace. Let life be responsible for everyone else. Life and the divine laws is a great way of taking care of anyone who is stubborn enough to try to fight against the tide of progress and the evolution in love and morality and intelligence. Life will show that individual what he needs to do. So we don't need to show or share or tell anyone what they need to do, only ourselves, so that life doesn't tell us. Only faith in the future life and justice of God, who never lets wrongdoing pass without correction, will give us the strength to bear up patiently under blows to our interests and our self-respect. This is why we constantly repeat how important it is to consider the future. The more we can raise our thoughts above this material life, the less we will be hurt by the things of this world. So let us be the roadrunner to the Wiley Coyotes of our lives, right? And in the 13th century in Persia, there was a philosopher of great stature who has some wonderful poetry. His name is Rumi. If you're not familiar with him, I strongly encourage you to look at some of his writings. A disciple of his asked him, "What is poison?" And Rumi replied to his disciple and said, "Anything which is more than our necessity is poison. It may be power, wealth, hunger, ego, greed, laziness, love, ambition, hate, or anything." "What is anger, Rumi?" And he answered his disciple, "Non-acceptance of things which are beyond our control. If we accept, it becomes tolerance." Well, what is hatred? Non-acceptance of a person as he is. If we accept a person unconditionally, it becomes love. How wise is this? He certainly is one of those spirits spiritual messengers who came into that graph that I showed earlier, who is way beyond that range that we are found in, and came to push humanity forward in the 13th century, mind you. That's how long ago it was, and look how wise he is. To this day, many people don't think this way. So we have to take heed to these lessons because they're wonderful. And this encompasses the entire talk, basically, of turning the other cheek. And it's also in line with question 886 of the Spirit's book. What is the true meaning of the word charity as Jesus understood it? Because charity is love. Without love, there's no charity. And without charity, there's no salvation. Benevolence toward everyone. So again, if we accept, it becomes tolerance. We're kind to one another. We're benevolent to one another. Indulgence toward the imperfections of others. Non-acceptance of a person as he is. If we accept a person unconditionally, it becomes love. We're indulgent towards that person's mistakes and errors. That slowly matures into love. It's a tiny seed that slowly with time will grow and grow into a fine flower of love. And forgiveness for offenses. Of course, forgiveness implies that we are offended. The goal is to not be offended at all, so we do not need to forgive. Because we just are walking around like Jesus did, following his footsteps. Because guess what? Jesus didn't need to forgive anyone. Because we're all his little brothers and sisters, and he loves us dearly the same way. Doesn't matter who we are, what we're doing, he loves us the same way. Because that's the love of the Father, and he's a representation of the King of the Father. It is a love that knows no differences. Because that love understands that within us all is the divine Father, is his essence. So we're all perfect. The problem is that we're still trying to get to that point. We're still working to get to that point, to grow those virtues and transform ourselves. In the Gospel explained by the Spiritist doctrine, we find that we recognize a true Spiritist. It doesn't have to be a Spiritist, but a person who wants to better himself as someone who engages in this transformation of the self, in this moral transformation, to overcome his negative inclinations, his bad inclinations. And that's what we need to do. That is the goal of our lives. The only goal that matters, really. So, this is the lesson from Christ, that we need to turn the other cheek. And just to finalize, just a brief thing I want to read to you. This is a message from Joana de Angelis, and I think it's very nice, and it goes along with this, where she says that, let me just find it here. Okay. If someone upsets you, it is because that person needs help and not a conflict. It is his or her method of seeking attention to his or her loneliness and anguish. Fire with fire amplifies the devastating fire. Practice placing the water of peace on the kettle or the brazier where the fire is, and the threatening flames will be extinguished. To turn the other cheek is more than exposing the opposite side in order to suffer a new perverse assault. It concerns the hidden, noble, moral side, rich with elevated sentiments that distinguish one creature from the other. The other cheek is the sleeping, look how beautiful this is. The other cheek is the sleeping angel in the luminescent landscapes of your inner world. There you possess treasures of friendship and kindness that are unknown to you. As you become acquainted with it, you will rise again from the ashes, like the mythological phoenix that renewed itself and emerged from the ashes that consumed it. You are responsible for your actions, like the sower that proceeds through his field, throwing the grains that will germinate with time. It is likely that many will be lost, many of the seeds will be lost, while others will produce in double, providing for a harvest greater than the volume sown. It is necessary to care for the type of seeds that will be distributed by your hands. Sow goodness and you will reap the joy of living, never returning evil for evil, like the parable of the sower, right? That still other seed fell in good soil where it produced a crop 160 or 30 times what was sown. And then finally, remove the mental waste and allow the other cheek to present itself glistening and shining with the spiritual sun, so that true love may be the emblem of your conduct in any circumstance or difficult occurrence. So let's try to turn the other cheek, but not the other cheek where we want to continue with aggression, but the other cheek, which is the peaceful one, so we can spread joy and love throughout the world. I thank you all very much for your attention and for coming here today. And as always, from the bottom of my heart, I hope that Jesus guides each and every one in your steps in this life, and may God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much.